During family dinner with my wife and parents, I got a text message from an unknown number. Get up and leave. Now, don't say anything to your wife and parents. I decided to listen and found out this. The police were knocking at their door. You know how some nights just feel routine? Like you could sleepwalk through them and still hit every beat perfectly? That's exactly what I was thinking as I pulled into my parents' driveway. The familiar crunch of gravel under my tires sounding like a soundtrack I'd heard a million times before. Brielle was fixing her lipstick in the passenger mirror. That coral shade she always wore to family dinners because my mom once said it looked so lovely on her. Ready for another thrilling evening of your dad's investment stories? She teased, giving me that sideways smile that used to make my heart skip. These days, it just felt like part of the routine too. I grabbed the bottle of wine we'd picked up, some mid-shelf Cabernet that looked fancy enough to impress, but wouldn't break the bank. Come on, it's not that bad, I said, though honestly, I was already mentally preparing for Dad's inevitable lecture about cryptocurrency or whatever financial trend had caught his attention this week. The front door opened before we even knocked, because of course it did. Mom had probably been watching from the kitchen window like she always does, timing everything perfectly. There are my favorite kids, Loretta practically sang, wrapping us both in one of those mom hugs that somehow manages to be warm and suffocating at the same time. Walking into that house was like stepping into a time capsule. Same beige walls, same family photos arranged in perfect rows, same smell of whatever fancy candle Mom had burning in the living room. Everything was exactly where it had been for the past 15 years, down to the little ceramic dish on the coffee table that held nothing but somehow looked important. Dad emerged from his home office, probably finishing up some work call or checking his portfolio one last time before dinner. Theo? Brielle. Perfect timing, he said, straightening his tie even though we were just having a casual family dinner. That was Marvin for you, always dressed like he might need to close a business deal at any moment, even on a Tuesday night at home. We settled around that polished wood dining table, the one Mom was so proud of because it came from some estate sale in Connecticut. I'd eaten at this table probably 1,000 times over the years, birthday dinners, holiday meals, random Sunday visits when Brielle and I were feeling domestic and wanted to play the good son and daughter-in-law. The conversation flowed exactly like it always did. Dad poured wine with the precision of someone who'd watched too many sommelier videos on YouTube. Mom bustled between the kitchen and dining room, bringing out her signature roasted chicken with those green beans that were somehow both overcooked and underseasoned every single time. But we all pretended they were delicious because that's what you do at family dinners. Brielle was in full charm mode, asking all the right questions about Mom's book club and Dad's golf game. She had this way of making everyone feel like the most interesting person in the room, which I used to think was one of her best qualities. Tonight, though, something felt slightly off about it. Like she was performing just a little too hard, you know? So Theo, Dad said, cutting into his chicken with surgical precision, how's work treating you? That promotion's still looking good. I launched into my usual update about the marketing firm, the clients, the projects that were going well, and the ones that were driving me crazy. Normal dinner table stuff. Mom chimed in with questions about my coworkers she'd never met, but somehow remembered the names of. Brielle added commentary about my workload and how proud she was of me landing that big account last month. Everything was so perfectly, boringly normal. That's when my phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it. We had this unspoken rule about phones during family dinner. Mom had made enough passive-aggressive comments over the years that we all knew to keep them face down and silent. But something made me glance at the screen anyway. Maybe it was the way the vibration felt different, more urgent somehow. No name, no emoji, no profile picture. Just a number I didn't recognize and a message that made my blood run cold. Get up and leave. Now, don't say anything to your wife or your parents. My fingers literally froze around my fork. This wasn't some spam text or wrong number situation. The message was too specific, too direct. Someone knew exactly where I was and who I was with. But who the hell would send something like this? And why? I tried to keep my expression neutral, but my heart was suddenly pounding like I'd just sprinted up 3 flights of stairs. Mom was saying something about her neighbor's new garden, and Brielle was nodding along like she actually cared about Mrs. Henderson's tomato plants. Dad was refilling wine glasses with that same methodical attention to detail. But now everything felt different. The familiar warmth of the dining room suddenly seemed stifling. The casual conversation sounded forced, almost scripted. Even the way everyone was sitting felt staged, like we were all actors who'd forgotten we were supposed to be playing a family. I cleared my throat, trying to sound casual even though my voice felt like it was coming from someone else's body. I need to hit the bathroom real quick. Such an ordinary excuse. Such a normal thing to say. Mom barely looked up from her story about the HOA meeting. Dad just waved me away with his wine glass. Brielle gave me a quick smile and went back to listening to whatever Mom was saying about property values and neighborhood drama. I pushed back from the table and headed down the hallway, my legs feeling weirdly unsteady. This was the same path I'd walked a million times, past the family photos, past the guest bedroom, past Mom's little reading nook with the antique chair nobody was allowed to actually sit in. But tonight, each step felt like I was walking towards something I couldn't name, something that was about to change everything. The house had never felt so quiet, even with the three of them still chatting in the dining room. It was like all the familiar sounds, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the grandfather clock, the soft murmur of conversation, had been muffled by this sudden, overwhelming sense that nothing was what it seemed. I reached the guest bathroom and stepped inside, my hand shaking slightly as I turned the lock. My hands were literally trembling as I stared at that text message, reading it over and over like the words might somehow rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Get up and leave. Now, don't say anything to your wife or your parents. What kind of sick joke was this? And who the hell had my number? I could hear them laughing about something in the dining room. Probably one of Dad's terrible puns that he thought were comedy gold. The sound felt surreal now, like I was listening to it through thick glass. Everything that had seemed normal 5 minutes ago now felt like an elaborate performance, and I was the only one who didn't know the script. My finger hovered over the number. Should I call it back? Should I ignore it completely? Should I march back out there and show everyone the message? Turn it into some weird family mystery we could all solve together? But something deep in my gut was screaming at me to take this seriously. You know that feeling when every instinct you have is telling you that you're in danger, even when your logical brain is trying to convince you everything's fine. I pressed call. It rang twice before someone picked up. Theo. The voice was hushed, urgent, like whoever was talking was trying not to be overheard. Who is this? I whispered back, not even sure why I was keeping my voice down. It's Alec. Alec. Jesus Christ. My brother-in-law. Well, former brother-in-law. Brielle's sister Sarah's ex-husband. We'd gotten along pretty well when he was part of the family, shared a few beers at barbecues, watched some games together. But after the divorce got ugly a couple years back, we'd basically lost touch. I think I'd seen him maybe twice since then, just awkward nods at the grocery store or whatever. Alec? Dude, what the hell is going on? How did you even get this number? Listen to me very carefully, he said, his voice tight with something that sounded like fear. Don't drink anything else. Don't eat anything else. You need to get out of there right now. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? I'm at my parents' house having dinner. Everything's normal. No, it's not. His voice cracked slightly. Theo, I think they spiked your drink. I overheard something earlier today. They're planning to use your fingerprint while you're unconscious. Your phone, your banking apps. They want access to everything. The bathroom suddenly felt like it was spinning. I had to grab the edge of the sink to steady myself. That's insane. You're talking about my wife. My parents. They wouldn't. I know how it sounds, Alec interrupted. Trust me, I know. But I heard them, man. I was at Sarah's place dropping off some of Emma's stuff, and Brielle was there. They didn't know I was in the kitchen. I heard your mom on speakerphone, and they were talking about timing, about making sure you'd be out long enough for them to handle the transfers. This couldn't be real. This was like something out of a bad thriller movie, not my actual life. Alec, come on. Why would they need to drug me? If they needed money, they could just ask. We're family. When's the last time you checked your accounts, Theo? Really check them? The question hit me like a slap. When was the last time? I'd been so busy with work lately, and Brielle handled most of our household finances anyway. She was better with numbers, more organized. I trusted her completely. Had been trusting her for years. They're in deep, man, Alec continued. Your parents took out some kind of loan they can't cover. Something about a bad investment your dad made. And Brielle, she's been moving money around. Small amounts at first, but it's been escalating. I felt sick. Actually physically nauseated. How do you know all this? Because Sarah's been worried about you. She tried to warn Brielle to come clean before it went too far, but Brielle just got angry and defensive. Said it was none of Sarah's business. That's when they started planning this dinner thing. My legs felt weak. I sat down on the closed toilet seat, still gripping the phone like it was the only solid thing in my world. So my own sister-in-law knew and didn't tell me. She wanted to, but she didn't have proof. Just suspicions and overheard conversations. But when I heard them talking today about drugging you, his voice got even quieter. I couldn't let that happen. I don't care how messy things got between me and Sarah. You're a good guy, Theo. You don't deserve this. Through the bathroom door, I could hear Brielle calling out, "Honey, you okay in there? Your food's getting cold." The sound of her voice, so sweet, so concerned, made my skin crawl. Was that fake? Had it always been fake? How long had this been going on? What did you hear exactly? I whispered into the phone. Your mom's saying something about, once he's out, we'll have maybe an hour before he comes around. Brielle talking about which apps have the highest transfer limits. Your dad mentioning something about covering tracks, so it looks like normal spending patterns. Each word felt like a physical blow. These were the people I loved most in the world. The people I'd trust with my life, and apparently, they were planning to rob me blind. I know what I heard, Theo. I know how crazy this sounds. But you need to trust me on this one. Whatever you do, don't let them know you're suspicious. Play along, but don't consume anything else. And get out of there as soon as you can without making them think something's wrong. My mouth felt dry as cotton. What if you're wrong? What if this is all some misunderstanding? Then you'll have worried for nothing, and you can go back to your normal life tomorrow. Alex said. But if I'm right, man, if I'm right, they were about to clean you out completely. Maybe even worse. I could hear footsteps in the hallway. Someone was coming to check on me. I have to go, I whispered. Theo, wait. Be smart about this. Don't confront them tonight. Just survive the evening and figure out your next move when you're safe. The line went dead just as someone knocked softly on the bathroom door. Sweetie? Brielle's voice, muffled but concerned. Everything all right? I stared at myself in the mirror above the sink. Same face, same guy who'd woken up this morning thinking his biggest problem was a difficult client at work. But now everything had changed. Now I was looking at someone whose entire world might be built on lies. Yeah, I'm fine. I called through the door, trying to make my voice sound normal, even though my heart was hammering against my ribs like it was trying to break free. Just, stomach's a little weird. Too much coffee today, I think. Oh no. Honey. Brielle's voice was so full of concern it made me want to punch the wall. Do you need some Pepto? Mom probably has some in the medicine cabinet. Nah, I'm good. Be out in a sec. I heard her footsteps retreat down the hallway, probably heading back to continue whatever performance they were all putting on in the dining room. As soon as the sound faded, I slumped against the bathroom door and tried to process what Alec had just told me. But here's the thing. Once someone plants that seed of doubt in your head, everything starts looking different. Suddenly, all those little moments that seemed innocent before began clicking together like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle I never realized I was solving. Like 3 weeks ago, when Brielle had been messing around on my phone and accidentally changed my banking app password. She'd been so apologetic about it, laughing about how clumsy she was with technology. I was just trying to check the weather, baby, and somehow I got into your banking thing, and now it's asking for all these security questions I don't know. We'd spent 20 minutes resetting everything, with her helping me set up the new password and security settings. At the time, I thought it was sweet how invested she was in helping me fix her mistake. Now I was wondering if it had been a mistake at all. And then there was Mom's sudden crisis about some loan issue she needed help with. She'd called me at work 2 weeks ago, sounding stressed and embarrassed. Theo, honey, I hate to bother you with this, but your father and I got ourselves into a little financial pickle. Nothing serious, just some paperwork confusion with a home equity loan. Could you maybe co-sign something for us? Just temporarily, until we get this straightened out. I'd said yes without even thinking about it. Of course I had. They were my parents. They'd helped me through college, been there when I was starting my career, supported me through every major life decision. If they needed help, I was going to help them. But now I was remembering how vague Mom had been about the details, how she'd rushed me off the phone when I started asking specific questions about the loan terms and amounts. And Dad, Jesus, Dad and his jokes about money. Just last month at Sunday brunch, He'd made some crack about how inheritance is great, but cash flow is better. Everyone had laughed, including me. But he'd also made this weird comment about how I was sitting on all this money in savings accounts earning nothing, and how I should diversify or make some investments. When I'd asked what he meant specifically, he'd waved it off like it was just general financial advice. But what if it wasn't general advice? What if he was fishing for information about how much I had and where I kept it? The more I thought about it, the more those innocent family moments started feeling like reconnaissance missions. All those casual questions about my work bonuses, about whether Brielle and I were planning any big purchases, about our retirement planning and investment strategies. I'd always assumed they were just being caring, involved parents and in-laws. God, I was such an idiot. I splashed some cold water on my face and tried to pull myself together. I had to go back out there and act normal. Whatever was really going on, I couldn't let them know that I knew, or that I suspected, or that some part of me was starting to believe that the three people I trusted most in the world had been planning to drug me and steal my money. When I walked back into the dining room, they were all exactly where I'd left them. Mom was refilling the water glasses, Dad was cutting his chicken into precise little squares like he always did, and Brielle was scrolling through her phone with a little frown of concentration. "Feeling better, sweetie?" Mom asked, and her concern seemed so genuine that for a second I almost convinced myself that Alec was wrong, that this was all some crazy misunderstanding. "Yeah, much better," I said, sliding back into my chair. My cranberry juice was sitting exactly where I'd left it, the ice cubes mostly melted now, but the glass still pretty full. My favorite drink. Mom always made sure to have cranberry juice when I came over because she knew I preferred it to wine with dinner. My favorite drink that might be laced with something to knock me out. I picked up the glass and held it like I was about to take a sip, watching their faces carefully. Was that a flicker of anticipation in Dad's eyes? Was Mom paying just a little too much attention to whether I was actually drinking? "You know what?" I said suddenly, setting the glass back down. "I just remembered I'm supposed to call my boss back about something. Mind if I step outside for a quick SEC? It'll just take a minute." "Of course, honey," Brielle said. "Take your time." But as I stood up, I noticed Dad's jaw tighten slightly, and Mom's smile seemed a little too bright, a little too forced. I walked toward the front door, but instead of going outside, I ducked into the living room and crouched behind the couch, where I could still hear the dining room conversation. I felt ridiculous, like some paranoid weirdo spying on his own family. But I had to know. For about 30 seconds, there was just normal dinner conversation. Then Dad's voice, lower than before. "Think he suspects anything?" "No way," Brielle replied. "He's been distracted with work stuff all week. Besides, look how much he's had to drink already." My blood ran cold. I hadn't had anything to drink except that cranberry juice I'd barely touched. Unless they were talking about something else entirely. I stayed crouched behind that couch for another minute, straining to hear more, but they'd gone back to talking about normal stuff. Something about Mom's book club and whether the neighbor's tree was dropping too many leaves in their yard. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe my paranoia was making me hear conversations that weren't actually happening. But I couldn't shake Alec's warning. And I couldn't forget the way Dad's expression had changed when I'd set down that cranberry juice. I walked back into the dining room, forcing myself to smile and act casual. "Sorry about that." "Crisis averted," I said, settling back into my chair. The cranberry juice was still sitting there, looking innocent as hell. Just a normal glass of juice at a normal family dinner. Except nothing felt normal anymore. I picked up my fork and took a bite of Mom's green beans, which tasted exactly like they always did, slightly overcooked and underseasoned, but made with love. Then I reached for the cranberry juice again, lifting it toward my lips while watching their faces in my peripheral vision. Dad was cutting his chicken with laser focus, but I caught him glancing up at me. Mom was asking Brielle about her work schedule for next week, but her eyes kept darting to my glass. And Brielle? God. Brielle was practically vibrating with nervous energy, her leg bouncing under the table like it always did when she was anxious about something. The glass was almost to my mouth when inspiration struck. "Oh crap," I said, setting it down quickly. "Did you guys hear that?" Sounded like a car door. All three of them immediately turned toward the front window, craning their necks to see if someone was in the driveway. It was the perfect distraction. While they were looking away, I tilted the glass under the table and quietly poured the entire contents onto the carpet beneath my chair. The liquid soaked into the beige fibers silently, leaving just the ice cubes in an empty glass. "I don't see anyone," Mom said, still peering through the window. "Probably just the neighbors," Dad added. I set the empty glass back on the table and leaned back in my chair, trying to look relaxed. "Man, I'm feeling weird all of a sudden. Kind of dizzy." That got their attention real quick. All three of them turned back to me with expressions of concern that might have been genuine or might have been anticipation. I couldn't tell anymore. "You do look a little pale, honey," Brielle said, reaching over to feel my forehead. Her hand was cool against my skin, and for a split second, I wanted to believe this was all just my imagination. That my wife of 4 years was actually worried about me, not waiting for me to pass out so she could rob me blind. "I think I just need to lie down for a minute," I said, letting my voice get a little slurred. "Maybe on the couch?" "Of course, sweetie," Mom said, already getting up to help me. "You probably just need to rest. Too much work stress lately." They guided me to the living room couch like I was some fragile invalid, which would have been touching if I wasn't pretty sure they were just making sure I was positioned somewhere convenient for whatever they had planned. Dad grabbed a throw pillow from the armchair, and Mom disappeared to get a blanket from the linen closet. "Just close your eyes and relax," Brielle said, stroking my hair as I settled onto the couch. "We'll clean up dinner. You don't have to worry about anything." I let my eyelids flutter closed, but not completely. Just enough to look unconscious while still being able to see through my lashes. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they'd be able to hear it, but I forced my breathing to stay deep and even. The blanket settled over me, soft and warm. Mom's voice, barely above a whisper. "How long do you think it'll take?" "Give it another 10 minutes to be safe," Dad replied, his voice equally quiet. He had quite a bit. Quite a bit of what? The cranberry juice I'd dumped on the floor? Were they talking about some other drink I'd had? Or were they just assuming their plan had worked? I heard the soft sounds of them moving around, dishes clinking as they cleaned up dinner, quiet footsteps back and forth between the dining room and kitchen. Normal after-dinner sounds, except for the whispered conversations I couldn't quite make out. Then, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only about 15 minutes, I heard Brielle's voice, so close she must have been standing right next to the couch. "Is he out?" A pause. Someone was studying me, probably checking to see if I was really unconscious. I kept my breathing steady, my face completely relaxed. Years of pretending to be asleep when I was a kid, trying to avoid getting in trouble or having to do chores, had apparently prepared me for this moment. "Yeah," Dad's voice, confident. "He's gone. Look at him." That's when I felt it, someone lifting my left hand. My fingers were positioned carefully, and I felt the smooth surface of my phone's screen against my thumb. The slight vibration as it unlocked with my fingerprint. Every muscle in my body wanted to tense up, to jerk my hand away, to sit up and scream at them. But I forced myself to stay limp, to keep breathing steadily, to play dead while they literally stole from me using my own unconscious body. "We're in," Brielle's voice, barely audible but filled with relief. The sound of fingers swiping across my phone screen. Multiple voices murmuring as they navigated through my apps. I wanted to vomit. These people, my wife, my parents, were huddled around my phone like vultures, picking through my financial life while I lay there pretending to be drugged. "Jesus, look at his savings account balance," Mom whispered. "I told you he was sitting on a pile of cash," Dad replied. "He's always been too conservative with money. Too conservative. Like it was some character flaw that I didn't blow every paycheck the second I got it." "How much do we need?" Brielle asked. "Enough to cover the loan and get us back to zero," Dad said. "Maybe a little extra for the legal fees." "Legal fees? What legal fees?" How deep was this hole they'd dug themselves into? I lay there listening to them fumble around with my phone, and honestly, it was taking every ounce of self-control I had not to start laughing. Because here's what they didn't know, what none of them could have possibly known. I'd changed my security settings just last night. See, there'd been this news story about some guy in California who got mugged and the thieves forced him to unlock his phone with his fingerprint while he was half conscious. The whole thing had freaked me out enough that I'd spend an hour before bed updating all my security protocols. I'd switched from simple fingerprint access to what they call true two-factor authentication, meaning even if someone had my thumb, they'd still need a secondary code that got sent to a completely different device. My work phone, which was sitting in my car. But they didn't know that yet. They were still swiping and tapping, probably looking at my main banking app and feeling pretty good about themselves. I could hear the excitement in their whispered voices, like kids on Christmas morning who thought they'd just unwrapped the present of a lifetime. Okay, I'm in the main account, Brielle said, and I could practically hear her smiling. Holy shit. Theo wasn't kidding when he said business was good this year. The casual way she said my name, like I was just some mark they were running a con on, not her husband of 4 years. Not the guy who'd held her hair back when she had food poisoning. Not the guy who'd driven 6 hours to help her move her grandmother into assisted living. Just Theo, the sucker with a healthy bank account. How much can we move without triggering any alerts? Dad asked. I think anything under 10 grand per transaction should be fine, Mom chimed in. But we should probably split it across a few different transfers to be safe. They had this whole thing planned out. This wasn't some desperate, spur-of-the-moment decision. They'd been strategizing, researching, figuring out the best way to clean me out without getting caught. How long had they been planning this? Weeks? Months? Let me try to set up the first transfer, Brielle said. That's when the real fun began. I heard some tapping, then a pause. More tapping, faster now. Then Brielle's voice, confused. That's weird. It's asking for some kind of verification code. What kind of code? Dad asked. I don't know. It says it sent something to a secondary device for security purposes. More frantic swiping and tapping. I could practically feel their growing frustration radiating across the room. Try the other banking app, Mom suggested. The one for the business account. Same thing, Brielle said after a minute. Everything's locked behind this two-step verification thing. When did he set this up? If they had looked at my face right then, they might have caught the tiny smile I couldn't quite suppress. But they were too focused on my phone, too caught up in their own panic to pay attention to their supposedly unconscious victim. Maybe try Venmo or PayPal, Dad said. Those might have different security settings. Already tried. Same thing across the board. But here's the beautiful part, the part that made me want to jump up and take a bow. While they were discovering that all their careful planning had been for nothing, they were also recording themselves in the process. Because I hadn't just changed my security settings last night. I'd also activated a little app I'd downloaded months ago and never used. One of those evidence collection apps that lawyers recommend for people going through messy divorces. It had been sitting on my phone since back when my buddy Jake was dealing with his ex-wife's crazy accusations, and he'd told me to download it just in case Brielle ever goes psycho on you, dude. I'd laughed it off at the time, figured I'd never need it. The app was designed to record audio automatically when certain trigger words were detected, words like bank, transfer, money, and account. And the best part? No visible recording indicator. No blinking lights, no notification sounds. Just a clean audio file being saved to a secure cloud storage that only I had access to. Every whispered conversation, every casual mention of cleaning out my accounts, every moment of them celebrating their brilliant plan. It was all being documented in crystal clear digital audio. They had no idea they were creating the evidence that would destroy them. This doesn't make sense, Brielle was saying, her voice getting more strained. He never mentioned changing any of this stuff. His passwords are usually so simple. Try his birthday, Mom suggested. Or your anniversary. I already tried all that. And even if I could guess the right codes, where would they be sending the verification numbers? I don't have access to his work phone. His work phone, which was locked in my car in the driveway, well out of their reach. Even if they figured out the security system, they'd have to get past me to retrieve the device that could actually complete their little theft operation. How long do these drugs usually last? Dad asked. Maybe we should wait until he's deeper under and then search for his other phone. I don't know, Mom replied. The internet said anywhere from 1 to 3 hours, depending on his weight and how much he drank. The internet. They'd actually researched this online, probably Googling how to drug someone, and how long do sleeping pills take to work, like a bunch of amateur criminals planning their first heist. The thought would have been hilarious if it wasn't so completely terrifying. Well, we can't just sit here all night, Brielle said. If he wakes up and finds us going through his phone. He won't wake up, Dad said firmly. Just keep trying different combinations. Maybe there's some override function or something. They kept at it for another 10 minutes. their voices getting progressively more frustrated and panicked. I lay there listening to my family fall apart in real time, watching their careful plan crumble into chaos, all while they created a perfect audio record of their attempted crime. It was almost poetic, really. After what felt like an eternity of listening to them curse at my phone and argue about what to do next, I heard the magical words I'd been waiting for. "Put the phone back exactly where you found it." That was Dad, his voice tight with frustration and defeat. "We'll have to figure out another approach. Maybe when he's at work tomorrow, Brielle can get into his home computer or something." Another approach. Jesus Christ, they were already planning their next attempt to rob me. This wasn't some one-time desperation move. This was just the first strategy in what was probably going to be a whole campaign of theft. I felt my phone being carefully placed back into my hand, my fingers positioned to make it look like I'd been holding it when I passed out. The weight of it felt different now, like it was contaminated by their touch. Everything felt contaminated. "How much longer should we wait before trying to wake him up?" Mom asked. "Give it another 20 minutes, Brielle said. "Then I'll start acting worried and suggest we should get him home." Acting worried. About her own husband. The husband she'd just spent the last hour trying to rob while he was unconscious. I wanted to throw up, but I forced myself to keep breathing steadily, to maintain the charade for just a little bit longer. Those 20 minutes crawled by like 20 hours. I listened to them clean up the rest of dinner, heard the quiet clink of dishes being loaded into the dishwasher, the soft murmur of conversation about completely normal things. Mom mentioned that the Hendersons across the street were getting their driveway redone. Dad brought up something about needing to schedule a tune-up for his car. Brielle talked about a new restaurant that had opened downtown that we should try sometime. Like there was still going to be a we after tonight. It was surreal, listening to them slip back into their regular family personas after what they'd just attempted. Like they could just compartmentalize attempted theft the same way other people compartmentalized work stress or family drama. Just another item on the to-do list. Drug Theo, steal his money, clean up dinner, discuss weekend plans. Finally, Brielle's voice, right next to my ear. "Theo? Honey, wake up." I let my eyelids flutter open slowly, like I was coming out of a really deep sleep. What happened? "You passed out on the couch, sweetie. You've been sleeping for almost an hour." Her hand was stroking my hair, and the touch made my skin crawl. But I forced myself to lean into it, to play the part of the groggy, confused husband. An hour. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes and trying to look disoriented. "Man, I feel like I got hit by a truck. What did you guys put in that cranberry juice?" The silence that followed that question was deafening. I looked around at their faces, Mom's guilty expression, Dad's carefully neutral poker face, Brielle's nervous smile, and for a second, I thought they might actually confess. Just break down and admit what they'd tried to do. Instead, Mom laughed. "Oh, honey, it was just regular juice. You've probably been working too hard lately. Your body was telling you to rest." "Yeah," I said, stretching and yawning. "You're probably right. I think I should head home and get some real sleep." "That's a good idea," Dad said, a little too quickly. "You don't want to push yourself when you're feeling run down." I stood up, testing my balance like I was still a little unsteady. "Thanks for dinner, guys. It was..." I paused, looking around at their expectant faces. It was really something. The hugs goodbye were the worst part. Mom wrapped me in one of her typical suffocating embraces, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from saying what I was really thinking. Dad gave me his usual firm handshake and pat on the back, the same gesture he'd been doing since I was a teenager. And Brielle? God. Brielle kissed my cheek and whispered, "Drive safe, baby," like she was a loving wife sending her husband home after a nice family evening. It was all so perfectly normal, so completely typical of how we always said goodbye after family dinners. Except this time, I knew it was the last time. This was the last time I'd ever stand in my parents' foyer pretending everything was fine. The last time I'd kiss my wife goodbye without knowing she was planning to destroy me financially. As I walked to my car, I could feel them watching me through the front window. Probably making sure I actually left, making sure their drug victim made it safely home so he wouldn't suspect anything when he woke up tomorrow morning missing a chunk of his life savings. I started the engine and backed out of the driveway with the careful attention of someone who was still feeling a little woozy. Gave them a little wave as I drove away, just like I always did. But in my head, I wasn't waving goodbye. I was saying goodbye to the family I thought I had. to the marriage I thought was solid, to the life I'd been living for the past 4 years, built on what I now realized was a foundation of lies and manipulation. As soon as I was around the corner and out of their sight, I pulled over and sat in my car for a minute, hands shaking on the steering wheel. The full weight of what had just happened was starting to hit me. These people, the people I loved most in the world, had drugged me, had tried to rob me while I was unconscious, had been planning God knows what other schemes to steal from me. I pulled out my phone and checked the recording app. 3 hours and 17 minutes of crystal clear audio, automatically uploaded to secure cloud storage. Every whispered conversation, every plan, every moment of them celebrating what they thought was their successful crime. I had them dead to rights. But first, I needed to make sure they couldn't try this again tomorrow or next week, or whenever they came up with their next brilliant plan to screw me over. I needed to protect myself, and then I needed to make sure they faced consequences for what they'd done. I drove straight to the police station. The police station at 9:30 on a Tuesday night wasn't exactly bustling with activity. Just a few officers behind the front desk, some guy in handcuffs being processed for what looked like a DUI, and the usual collection of people you'd expect to see in a small-town cop shop after dark. The fluorescent lights were harsh and unforgiving, making everyone look pale and slightly sick. I walked up to the front desk trying to figure out how to even begin this conversation. "Hi. I need to report a crime." Seemed too simple for what had just happened to me. "My family tried to drug and rob me," sounded like something a crazy person would say. The desk sergeant looked up from his paperwork, a middle-aged guy with tired eyes and the kind of mustache that had probably been in style when he first joined the force 20 years ago. "What can I help you with tonight?" "I was drugged," I said, keeping my voice steady and matter-of-fact. "My wife and my parents attempted to access my bank accounts using my fingerprint while I was unconscious. I have a recording of the entire incident." That got his attention. He set down his pen and really looked at me for the first time. "Okay, let's back up a second. You're saying your family drugged you?" "Yes. They put something in my cranberry juice during dinner tonight. The plan was to knock me out so they could use my fingerprint to transfer money from my accounts." I pulled out my phone. I have over 3 hours of audio recording their conversations about the plan and their attempts to access my banking apps. The sergeant's eyebrows went up. "You recorded them without their knowledge?" The app was already on my phone. It's designed to activate automatically when certain financial terms are mentioned. They had no idea it was recording. I paused, realizing how this might sound. "Look, I know how crazy this must seem, but I have evidence." He studied my face for a long moment, probably trying to figure out if I was some delusional nut job or if this was actually legit. "What's your name?" "Theo McKinney." "And these family members who allegedly drugged you, where are they now?" "At my parents' house, probably thinking their plan worked perfectly, and I'm at home sleeping off whatever they slipped me." The sergeant picked up his phone and made a quick call. "Detective Morrison?" "Yeah, I've got something weird down here you might want to take a look at." He covered the mouthpiece and looked at me. "Have a seat. Detective Morrison will be down in a few minutes." I sat in one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs that seems specifically designed to make you feel like a criminal, even when you're the victim. The whole situation felt surreal. 6 hours ago, I'd been worried about a client presentation tomorrow morning. Now I was sitting in a police station preparing to file charges against my own family. Detective Morrison turned out to be a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and the kind of sharp, intelligent eyes that probably missed very little. She introduced herself and led me to a small interview room that smelled like stale coffee and industrial disinfectant. "So," she said, settling into her chair with a notepad and pen, "tell me what happened tonight. Start from the beginning." I told her everything. About the mysterious text from Alec, about the phone call in the bathroom, about pretending to be unconscious while they tried to rob me. She listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes, her expression remaining neutral throughout my entire story. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "That's quite a story, Mr. McKinney. You understand how unusual this situation is." "Trust me, I'm aware. Let me hear this recording." I pulled up the app and played the relevant sections, the conversations about timing, about transfer limits, about how long the drugs would keep me unconscious. Their voices came through crystal clear, and I watched Detective Morrison's expression change as she listened to my wife discussing which of my accounts had the highest balances. "Jesus," She muttered when I played the part where Mom asked how much they needed to steal. You sure this is your family we're listening to? Unfortunately, yes. She made some more notes. You said they attempted to access your accounts, but were unsuccessful? I'd changed my security settings the night before. Everything was locked behind two-factor authentication that required a secondary device they didn't have access to. Smart move. Probably saved you a lot of money. She looked up from her notepad. Have you checked your accounts since this happened? Any unauthorized transactions? I pulled out my phone and quickly logged into my banking apps using my work phone for the verification codes. Everything looks normal. No transfers, no unusual activity. Good. That helps with the timeline. She continued writing. Now, you mentioned they gave you something in your drink. Did you consume any of it? No. I poured it out when they weren't looking. So there's no physical evidence of drugging in your system? That stopped me cold. I hadn't thought about that angle. No, probably not. But I heard them talking about putting something in my drink. It's on the recording. The recording is definitely helpful, but prosecutors like to have multiple forms of evidence. She tapped her pen against the notepad. Tell me about this person who warned you, Alec. I explained about Alec overhearing the planning conversation at Sarah's house. Detective Morrison made a note to contact him for a statement. Mr. McKinney, what they did absolutely qualifies as attempted fraud, conspiracy, and unlawful use of personal identifying information. The fact that they tried to use your biometric data while you were incapacitated makes it worse. She closed her notepad. But I have to ask, what outcome are you looking for here? These are serious charges. Your wife and parents could face significant legal consequences. The question hit me harder than I expected. What did I want? Justice? Revenge? Just protection from future attempts? I want them held accountable, I said finally. And I want to make sure they can never do this to me again. Or to anyone else. She nodded. Then let's get started on the paperwork. The first call came at 6:47 a.m., 2 days after I'd filed the police report. I was making coffee in my kitchen, trying to pretend this was just another normal Wednesday morning, when my phone started buzzing with Brielle's ringtone. I stared at the screen for a long moment, watching her contact photo, that sweet smile from our vacation in Maine last summer, flash at me like some cruel joke. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again, and again. By the time I'd finished my first cup of coffee, she'd called 7 times and left 3 increasingly frantic voicemails. I finally listened to one of them while getting dressed for work. Theo, honey, please call me back. The police were here this morning asking questions about Monday night's dinner. I don't understand what's happening. There's been some kind of misunderstanding, and I need to talk to you before this gets blown out of proportion. Please, baby, just call me. The fake confusion in her voice was almost impressive. Like she genuinely couldn't figure out why the cops might be interested in their little dinner party scheme. But there was something else underneath the confusion, panic. Real, barely controlled panic. My parents started calling around lunchtime. Mom first, of course, because she always took point on family drama. Her voicemail was a masterpiece of guilt-tripping and manipulation. Theo, sweetheart, I don't know what you think happened on Monday, but you're making a terrible mistake. We're your family. How could you believe we would ever hurt you? This is going to destroy everything we've built together. Please call me back so we can work this out like adults. Dad's approach was more direct, more threatening. Son, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but you need to call off these cops right now. You're about to blow up your whole life over some misunderstanding. Think about what you're doing here. Think about the consequences. The consequences. Like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I saved all the voicemails. Detective Morrison had told me they might be useful as evidence of witness tampering or intimidation. Everything they said just dug their hole deeper. By Thursday, the tone of their messages had shifted completely. Brielle's voice was raw with tears. Theo, please, we made a mistake, okay? It wasn't supposed to be like that. We were desperate, and we thought you'd understand if you knew how bad things had gotten. But drugging you was wrong. I know that now. Can't we just talk about this? Can't we work something out? Mom's message was even more desperate. How could you turn on your own mother? Theo, I raised you. I sacrificed everything for you. And this is how you repay me? By having me arrested like some common criminal? But it was Dad's final message that really showed me who these people actually were underneath all the family dinner pleasantries. You think the cops are going to help you? You think you're going to come out of this looking like the good guy? We know things about you too, son. Things that might interest the IRS. Things that might interest your employer. You want to play hardball? Let's see how that works out for you. Threats now. Direct, ugly threats about fabricating evidence against me. This from the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd helped me with homework, who'd walked me through my first job interview. Now he was threatening to destroy my career and have me audited by the feds because I'd had the audacity to report their crime. That's when I knew I'd made the right choice. I called Detective Morrison and told her about the escalating messages. "We'll add harassment and intimidation to the charges," she said. "Keep saving everything they send you. Don't respond to any of it." So I didn't respond. I blocked their numbers on my personal phone, but kept a separate device active to collect evidence. I changed my locks and activated the security system I'd been too lazy to set up before. I moved money to accounts they'd never heard of and changed every password they might have known. Most importantly, I called a divorce lawyer. Janet Kowalski came highly recommended for handling high-conflict separations involving financial crimes. Her consultation fee was steep, but worth every penny when she told me that Brielle would likely be facing criminal charges and civil liability, which would make the divorce proceedings much simpler. Document everything, she advised. Keep records of every attempt at contact, every threat, every manipulation. This isn't just a marriage ending. This is evidence of a criminal conspiracy that happened to involve your spouse. A criminal conspiracy that happened to involve my spouse. That was my life now. The day they entered their plea deals, I wasn't even in the courtroom. Detective Morrison called me while I was grabbing lunch at a sandwich shop near my office, letting me know it was all over. "No trial," she said. "They took the deal." Pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted identity theft, and unlawful use of personal identifying information. I sat there holding my turkey club, trying to process the words. What does that mean exactly? 2 years probation each, 500 hours of community service, restitution for your legal fees, and a permanent no-contact order. Plus, they'll have felony convictions on their records. Felony convictions. My wife and my parents were now convicted felons. The people who'd raised me, who'd been at my wedding, who I'd trusted with everything. They were criminals in the eyes of the law. No jail time. I asked. First offense, cooperative defendants. No actual financial loss since they never succeeded in transferring any money. The prosecutor felt probation was appropriate. She paused. They also had to forfeit the evidence, that audio recording. It's going to be part of their permanent case file. So somewhere in a courthouse filing cabinet, there was now an official record of my mother discussing the best way to drug her own son. That felt surreal in a way I couldn't quite wrap my head around. The aftermath wasn't dramatic. There was no big confrontation scene, no tearful family reconciliation, no moment where they broke down and begged for forgiveness. Just silence. Like they'd been erased from my life with all the fanfare of deleting old emails. My cousin Rory called about a month later with updates I didn't ask for, but couldn't help listening to. Brielle lost her job, he said. Something about the background check for her finance position turning up the felony conviction. She's working at some retail place now, making like a third of what she used to. I felt a flicker of something that might have been sympathy, but it passed quickly. She'd chosen her path when she'd chosen to drug me and steal my money. And your parents had to sell the house, Rory continued. Legal fees, plus they couldn't keep up with the mortgage after your dad got let go from the consulting firm. They're renting some tiny apartment across town now. The house I'd grown up in, where I'd eaten dinner at that polished wood table 1,000 times, where I'd celebrated every birthday and holiday for 32 years, sold to pay lawyers who couldn't keep them out of criminal convictions. How are they doing? I asked, not sure why I cared, but unable to stop myself from asking. They're different, Rory said carefully. Broken, I guess. Like something fundamental got taken out of them. Your mom barely talks anymore. Your dad just stares at the TV most days. Brielle. He trailed off. What about Brielle? She keeps asking people if they've heard from you. Keeps saying she just wants to apologize, to explain. But nobody knows where you moved, and she can't contact you directly because of the restraining order. I'd moved to a condo across town 3 weeks after filing for divorce. Clean, modern, no memories attached to anything in it. The divorce had been finalized quickly once Brielle's lawyer realized she had no leverage. You can't exactly argue for alimony when you're a convicted felon who tried to rob your spouse. They all thought you'd come around eventually, Rory said. I think they figured family was family, you know? That you'd forgive them after a while, and things would go back to normal. But that was the thing they never understood. There was no going back to normal. Normal had been a lie built on their ability to hide who they really were. Once I saw behind the masks, once I knew what they were capable of, there was no unseeing it. Maybe I should feel bad for them, I told Rory. Maybe I should feel guilty that their lives got destroyed. Do you? I thought about it for a minute. No, I really don't. And I didn't. They'd made their choice that Monday night when they decided to drug me and steal my money. Everything that happened afterward was just consequences. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my living room on a Saturday morning, drinking coffee that I bought with money that's actually mine, and I can't remember the last time I felt this peaceful. The apartment is quiet in the best possible way. No forced conversations over breakfast. No guilt trips disguised as concern. No wondering if the person sleeping next to me is plotting ways to rob me blind. Just silence and space, and the kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly where you stand with everyone in your life. Which, right now, is pretty much nowhere. And honestly, that's perfectly fine with me. I used to think being alone would feel empty, like I'd lost something essential. For years, I defined myself through my relationships, someone's son, someone's husband, part of some family unit that looked normal from the outside. I thought cutting those ties would leave me adrift, like a boat without an anchor. Instead, it feels like I finally learned how to breathe underwater. My bank account is mine. My phone is mine. My decisions are mine. Nobody's asking for loans or favors or access to things that belong to me. Nobody's pretending to love me while simultaneously planning to destroy me financially. It's just me, making my own choices, living my own life. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd actually drunk that cranberry juice. If I'd woken up the next morning to find my savings account emptied and my credit maxed out. Would they have consoled me? Helped me figure out what happened? Probably. They'd have been the perfect picture of concerned family members, supporting their poor victimized loved one through his mysterious financial crisis. The thought makes my skin crawl, but it also makes me grateful. Grateful for Alex's warning text, grateful for my paranoid security updates, grateful for whatever instinct told me to listen when every logical part of my mind was screaming that this couldn't be real. I never did find out exactly why Alec reached out that night. We texted a few times afterward, him checking to make sure I was okay, me thanking him for probably saving my life. But we didn't become buddies or anything. He'd done his good deed. I'd done what I needed to do with the information, and that was that. These days, my social life consists of work colleagues and a few old friends who never really liked Brielle anyway. Turns out several people had bad feelings about her that they'd never mentioned, probably because they figured married guys don't want to hear that their wives give off sketchy vibes. She always seemed like she was performing, my buddy Jake told me over beers last week. Like she was playing the role of perfect wife instead of just being herself. Performing. That was exactly right. They'd all been performing. The loving family, the concerned parents, the devoted wife. And I'd been the audience, applauding their act while they planned my destruction backstage. Now I sit with peace. Not family, not forgiveness, not some bullshit about healing or moving forward together. Just truth. Clean, simple, uncompromising truth. And I'll take that any day.